Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fourth quarter CTE committee meeting. We've got a great agenda in front of us today. First, I want to thank Michael Thomas for hosting us here and providing a great tour of the facilities. Really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Okay, so next slide. We've got a couple of things we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about this interagency approach that we're taking to designing and mapping career pathways. So really excited to hear about the progress there. And then we want to talk about and we'll vote on our career best practices report. This is something that we were asked to do by the AIB, and so we've got a great draft of that ready and then we'll have discussion on that today and then vote. And then we want to take a few minutes to look on the progress that we've made in 2025 and what's coming up in 2026. So that is the plan. Any questions about what we're all right. Before we move on to voting on this month, can you confirm that we have a forum?
We do have a forum present.
Okay. As you do here, we do have a forum present. Great. Okay. The two items that we need to approve at the top of the meeting today are both our agenda for today's meeting and then the meeting minutes from our July meeting. Members, this was provided to the committee in advance, so everyone's actually this review. If I can have a motion to approve of thank you, Brian. A second, thank you. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to start with a discussion of the interagency development and mapping of career pathways. I am excited to turn it over to Richard Kincaid, Shamara Bowens, and Dow to take us through the work that's been done and what kind of the plan is going forward.
Thank you, Myra. So the purpose of the interagency plan is to drive student outcomes by creating seamless pathways from high school to CTE, from high school CTE programs to post-secondary programs, apprenticeships, as well as industry recognized credentials aligned with high in demand careers. Additionally, this interagency plan establishes coordinated statewide alignment across the Maryland State Department of Education, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and the Governor's Workforce Development Board to ensure consistent, quality, clear credit transfer and shared responsibility for pathway design and implementation. And lastly, the purpose of this plan also strengthens Maryland's workforce pipeline by rooting pathways and priority industry sectors and ensuring students earn credentials valued by employers as well with opportunities for continued career advancement. So I'll hand it over to Richard and Emily to discuss a little bit more in depth with how this aligns with the Maryland State Department of Education and ML.
Thank you, Shamara, for that. So a couple of items that we wanted to make sure to amplify are the alignment of our strategic goals and then how we are communicating these goals to the broader community. And one item of note, many of the items that are within this interagency plan details work or planned work that's already been in the pipeline for all of our various agencies. So it doesn't signal a shift in any sort of policy. It doesn't signal a shift in any sort of programming. The request to underscore what Shamara said was from the AIB to put a document in writing verifying that there was collaboration happening with the various entities. So that's exactly what this is. One of the benefits of the work is it enabled us to be very clear about what our strategic goals are and to align around those goals as we're moving the system forward and knowing that this is an interagency approach. And it's important that we're all speaking with one voice on what it is we're doing and why. For that, we narrowed this down to really three broad strategic goals that all of our combined entities have. The first is to strengthen and scale pathways. And I have to underscore pathway work. When we think about this through the lens of Blueprint, we are only thinking about this in terms of pathways for high school students. It really is much broader than that. And so when we think about pathways, this begins early in middle school when we're working with our career counselors and coaches, helping kids to identify not only what their strengths are, but what their aspirations are, and to put them on a solid plan that includes high school coursework, but also through graduation. And having that alignment of making this a systems approach for all ages was a key element that we want to make sure we are communicating with one voice absolutely clearly. Next is to create a coherent statewide pathway system that begins in high school that leads the student all the way to and through entry-level and mid-level careers, making sure that they're connected along the way to post-secondary training, whether that's credit or non-credit, all of the different options that are available to them as career shifters. But at a very foundational level, making sure that every student that graduates has the ability to make those various career shifts as time moves on. And that's building that solid educational foundation. It's giving them the opportunity to understand and underscore pathways they may not have even considered or been exposed to if they didn't have this sort of CTE experience. And then third, advancing equity in student sports. On our team, and you've heard, MSD say loudly and proudly often, all means all. And when students walk through the doors of one of our educational institutions, we don't have the ability to select who gets to be educated and who doesn't. Everybody has that opportunity. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that the pathways that we are creating, students have access to. We are properly resourcing those regardless of zip code across the state. And all of those pathways lead to an industry recognized credential that is valued by the workforce. And then also additional ways for them to connect to the world of work, whether that's through an apprenticeship program, internship, or any of the other options that are available in the career connected learning spectrum. So all means all. And we want to make sure that the students have full access to these. And I'll turn it over to Emily to detail the next slide of each of the partner roles and swim lanes within the system.
Sure, thank you. You'll see on the slide, I don't want to repeat it, the leaning on Governor's Workforce Development Board to identify priority industries, really kind of focusing so that we're not trying to eat the whole elephant. So this is the time where we want to take one bite at a time and be strategic in the types of pathways that CTE programs and what's available to students. MSDE, more of an implementer in terms of program development, so taking that information from the Governor's Workforce Development Board and moving that into the high schools. And whether that's in CTE, dual enrollment, or in early college integration, with lots of options there in terms of how it gets implemented. And then from the MPEC side of things, ensuring that once a student has completed those opportunities, they're able to move them at least into the higher ed role, making sure that the colleges and universities will recognize those experiences in high school as college credit when appropriate, and jumping off points in terms of program alignment for college post-secondary education. So it's really these three entities working in collaboration so that, as Richard said, it is a more systems-wide approach than necessarily all of us working in isolation. We can move on to the timeline. 3-year timeline here of 3 phases. The first phase starting in 2026, as soon as this kind of gets on its way. Adopting statewide high wage, high skill, in-demand jobs framework from the governor's, again, like starting that strategic alignment, Governor's Workforce Development Board, identifying those strategic initiatives. Establishing cross-agency data sharing agreements, I think is an important element here. We'll probably end up leveraging LLDS when appropriate, so that we understand who's enrolling in these CTE programs, who's moving on to apprenticeship, who's moving on to college programming, who's bouncing back between all of these different options, and what that looks like. I do want to highlight the idea of vendor-led development career pathway maps for top occupations and priority industries. That's going to be a critical element for students and parents to understand, oh, if my student enrolls in this dual enrollment or starts this CTE program, what are the options available to them? So thinking through that forward facing while we're doing all the technical work behind the scenes, what does the public see moving forward? Phase 2, phase 3 is really about implementation. So looking at some pilot regions, working through those post-secondary workforce pathway maps, and really implementing what we're trying to do in phase 1. And then phase 3 is moving it to scale statewide.
About the how the calendar years align with school years. So the launching pilot pathways, is that school year 28-29 really, or is that is that
I would imagine so.
Yeah, so some of the work certainly is school year, but some of the work is also year round. So for example, when the pathway mapping that Emily mentioned happens, like that's more of workforce mapping that government workforce board will do, right? And then on the implementation pieces that are school facing, you could assume school year of that.
If I can just add on that real quick, I think some of it is a spring development implementation for the next academic year. So while it may start in that spring calendar year, it's meant for the following.
And just so we have the same understanding, can you define vendor? Was it
Sure.
vendor?
Yeah,
Somebody paying, was that somebody who's partnering with us?
yeah.
What do we think about that?
My understanding, it's kind of all of the above. Knowing that we don't necessarily have the resources at our independent agencies, trying to explore who out there can help. We've just had a number of higher ed summits, at least from the higher ed perspective. There's quite a bit of philanthropic dollars. There's a number of national organizations that are really interested in doing this work. So it may be vendor led, but at no cost or little cost to the state, depending on the initiative and where we can negotiate.
So the other piece of that particular element is in the statewide system function, right? And so this will be mapping of occupations statewide. And so I'm making eye contact with Rachel only to make sure that I get this right and don't misspeak. She will shoot me a look. Much of this work is happening at the government workforce development board level. So this would be a function of our ULR partners to map the system and priority occupations, right? And then those are the things that we would backwards map into to make sure that we're aligning both secondary and post-secondary programs into the identified workforce priority areas of the state.
And so to summarize, yes, vendor led in this instance does need your agreements capacity support to help us do it and do it efficiently over the first time. So. Okay. I had a couple questions. I will just confess that in looking at this work, I said, what exactly is a career pathway and what does it look like? So I went and looked at some that exist. And I guess my ask would be is do this work. Two things. One, we talk about some of the outcomes. So when I look at the expected outcomes, some of them it's more obviously how you measure them, and some of them are not. Like how do you measure greater alignment of work-based learning and employer needs? I honestly don't know. But in the phase 1, it feels to me like we should be really clear about what are the outcomes that we're driving towards. Why do we have these? And then how are we going to measure progress? Even though that's probably many years, it's going to take time to measure it. I just feel like that's something that we really need to be thoughtful about. And then the other question that I had, which again others may say, well, that's just this, in the stuff mark, but I'm looking at career pathway maps that have been published by other entities. I found myself asking, who uses this? And how do they use it? And what actions do people take as a result of this very long document? What are people actually doing? And I would love for us to, in this work, be very explicit about that, like, here is what is contained, here's the outline of every career pathway map, here are the different people, entities, whatever, that use this, here's how they use it. Because I haven't seen that be explicitly articulated in a way that a layperson could understand. So,
I think that's really helpful feedback, but we can make sure it's in this plan before we, put it to the IB, before we publish it, and so that we're clear and bring it back to the committee. And I think to kind of starting answer that question today, first, your point on measures is very well taken. Some of those things are much harder to measure, and I think we want to work with the committee offline between now and our next meeting to think about what would a good metric look like to you all. We can also explore some of the best practices in measuring some of those trickier items. When it comes to what a career pathway sort of map is and does, I think there's two pieces to this work. One is actually making sure that the career pathways exist before we put them, I'm going to say on paper, but I'll get to that point in a second. What they aim to do is to essentially articulate at every step along a career pathway or multiple career pathways, as many people slide and don't go linearly through a career path. It's more of a lattice or a shift. There might be multiple places you can go after you earn a particular credential. A career pathway map that's doing its job well, you clearly articulate, all right, here's what you need at this stage of your education, what skills you have to have, what credentials you have to have, and then you can move up to these next opportunities. We're really excited to work with hopefully a partner who can help us think differently rather than a long document, but about tools we can put in front of educators, career coaches, people designing curricula to do a couple things, advise students, families, as Richard shared earlier, and also for institutions to think, okay, if I'm designing a curriculum to prepare someone in this field, what skills do I need to make sure they're getting from my program? And how can I explain to them what they might get from that work? We know that this can vary significantly. So what we're aiming to do is really do this work focused on some high priority occupations. And again, aligning that work with things that board is going to be doing for the workforce system and with workforce Pell, new short-term Pell grants coming online. And then aligning that to the work we're doing for our CTE system. So that's a little bit on kind of how it gets used and what we try to articulate, and hopefully we can maybe create a new model that aren't just PDFs, but really, like I said, interactive tools that folks can use. And I won't look at anything. Thanks. But great feedback for what we've done here too. Thank you.
I think about this like user stories of anyone who's done any software development. You just mentioned a couple of things like, okay, I'm in charge of curriculum for blah, blah, blah. I would use this to do, X. I am a career counselor. We're going to talk about career coaching. I'm a career counselor. I would use these pathways. In what way would I use this to inform the conversations I'm having with students, how I'm developing their 6-year plan, like whatever. I think this is one of those areas where if you're really deep in the work, as many around the table are, it probably seems obvious, but if you're not, it just feels like a lot of words and you're not really sure. Like, yes, all of the words make sense, but I'm not sure what the so what is, so. What other questions do you guys have?
Is this a document that gets moved somewhere?
Yes, it is. This is a document that's submitted to the AID.
Okay.
And with that, just to remind everybody, when we submitted our implementation a year ago, and so did MST and Zipin, right? We all have implementation plans that are that's part of the blueprint. And one of the pieces of feedback that was given to all three was, okay, you all have these various implementation plans related and the career pathways as part of it. We want an interagency. Come back to us with an interagency plan for investments.
And I've probably said this before. I'm going to say, Richard, thank you, because in slide 6, he put it in there. But in the pathway alignment, there's nothing about apprenticeship. And I'm the apprenticeship guy. I got to throw it out there. I have argued that apprenticeship should be considered post-secondary.
Yeah.
And it says post-secondary degree, IRC. Okay, yeah, an apprenticeship is an IRC or employment. The problem is that apprenticeship prior to us having these meetings, apprenticeship was always just considered employment. think we recognize that it's education and it's career education. It should be.
I'll be very frank and own it for our team and say that was just an omission. That's not, that should be there. Thank you. For the
My
record,
soapbox.
for the record, MPEC agrees.
Everyone's in the agreement.
Yes.
What other thoughts or questions, you members have on this work?
I think this is building off of the chair's point of, you know, who's the user here. I do think where this work could be very powerful is especially with the institutional, you know, that are making those decisions of trying to understand what do we prepare for. I think the challenge can be with any of these exercises, and I think we've seen it with what happened with cybersecurity at the federal level. You know, a lot of time and energy was spent on those mappings. But people really have to use them. And I think what's happening now with AI is you start thinking about, okay, well, what are the, if things keep changing, then how does a CTE program, how does, you know, an LEA make decisions about what's foundational if we know that the path might kind of continue to morph and shift over the next 2 or 3 years? And so I think like an important part of that is it's easy to want to go to like the most defined name, like this particular, you know, security certification or whatever is most useful. But I do think the value of kind of having CTE foundational skills, like laddering into those post-secondary, very sometimes won't be overly specific, but like the over specificity isn't always that useful. I think it's really important to understand. We're going to have sort of a flexible architecture.
Yeah, and we completely echo that piece. That's an important element, and that was sort of the intentionality of building the CTE 4++ model. We know that there are certain knowledge and skills and things that a student needs to be ready to demonstrate across any job in any STEM, right? And so that really is the first 2 courses within the CTE program. But school moves slow. School reform is a slow process, and part of that is by design, and part of that's just bureaucratic. It happens, right? This is where, to Brian's point, the apprenticeship element becomes so important, is because in that 11th and 12th grade year, as we have designed the new system, the career connected learning element allows those quick pivots into changing industries, into emerging technologies, into how AI is implemented contextually within a field. Right? And I think that's where the real value happens, and that's where the movement can shift very quickly when students are exposed to those levels. And so, you know, that's why, you know, as a collective group, we are saying apprenticeship is the gold standard. Like, this is where those experiences can happen and where those shifts along industry can happen quite a bit more quickly than what you're getting at the foundational level through CTE. We can still sprinkle those things in, right? And we have to do that. But then there's a different way of handling the system.
I was gonna say, I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm even wondering if when we develop these career pathways, if we're thoughtful about, there are certain careers that we know, we don't know what it's gonna be 2 to 5 years from now, but we know it is likely to change. And if there's some forethought in that to say, to give some thought to, you know, what are the elements that are likely to be more static versus those that are likely to shift. I think we may not know exactly what the shifts are, but we probably know which career shifts will have them. And if there's some thinking included in this that lays that out, and gets at what you're saying, like there may be some components like shifting the curricular piece of this might be a longer term harder thing to do as these things shift. So what does that mean about how we emphasize apprenticeships and other forms of direct work experience that comes in?
And I think part of it, you know, I was kind of thinking about what we're going through with AI. And how does AI fit into this, you know, question that we will be considering. how do we leverage, leveraging resources that we have. And then I always go back to, the employee piece, the employer, the employer engagement, because at the end of that pathway has to lead to employment. And part of the pathway is to guide that student into that particular area. So I really feel like the emphasis force forward with employers is really, really important to complete the pathway, not to just build it out from the academic standpoint, whatever, but the whole goal at the end, one of our measurements ought to be employment and not just employment at McDonald's. There's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's, but are we offering a living wage? And is it based on the career ladder that was set, or the career pathway, or is this a job that someone got? So I think that should be part of it.
Any other thoughts? Okay, well, thank you, Sharon and William, Richard, for all the great work on this. And we look forward to hearing more as we start talking for the launch soon as well. Okay, the next part of our agenda, which is one, is to walk through our career counseling best practices report and what has been found in the research. So this work is really important because, as we talked about at this committee, when we launched the requirement and different around career counseling, there wasn't a lot of guidance or guardrails around how does this actually work, who's responsible for what's expected, and so LEAs and local workforce development boards have been partnering in all kinds of various ways over the last year. And I think this is an important moment that we look at, all right, what has the structure been, LEA by LEA, what does it look like? What seems to be working, not working? What can we learn? What can we do differently going forward? How can we provide more guidance, technical assistance, support for this work? So we have, just so everyone knows what we're about to walk through now, we are required to submit a best practices report to the AIB on December 1st. That requirement is really about conducting sort of what I call desk research, looking at what is actually contained in each of the MOUs, what are the roles and responsibilities, LEA by LEA, and then analyze that. We really wanted to take that a step further and so what you're gonna see today is that desk research, what we found with the teams, and what's the team that's going to work on me, but what the work that JFF along with our team did to really understand what is contained in those MOUs and how LEAs and local development boards are working today to deliver programs. JFF has also conducted a number of 60+ focus groups to get beyond just what is on paper and look at and really listen to what's working well, what are the challenges, where do people need help. And so there'll be a part 2 to this that we will hear a lot more about in January. But a lot of really good, media observations just in this initial report that we're looking forward to hearing more about. So I'm going to turn it over to Shauna and Shamira to take us through the career counseling best practices research.
Thank you, Myra. Next slide, please. So today we're going to share about the Maryland Blueprint for the Future Career Counseling Report. Again, I'm Shamira Bowens, the Senior Director of the CTE team within the Governor's Workforce Development Board. I'll be presenting alongside Shauna Payne, the Director of Jobs for the Future. And again, this initial report is just some desk research and our findings from some MOUs for current career counseling practices. And again, an expanded report will be available at the beginning of the year based on the findings from those 69 focus groups that JFF was able to facilitate. And we'll have that information readily available. Next slide, please. So initially, I'd like to share a little bit about the partnership and the who's who for individuals here on the meeting today. If there are some career counselors or individuals who implement career counseling on the ground, I want to note that the Governor's Workforce Development Board, we lead and develop the review of guidance and FAQs for the field. Additionally, we coordinate with the Maryland State Department of Education, with the Maryland Workforce Association, as well as the AIB. I'm not going to read this slide in depth. However, this is the who's who and who you should be contacting if you have questions or need support as we all continue to implement this career counseling work. Now, I want to hand it over to Shauna.
So before I do that, can I jump in really quick? Sorry, just a little bit additional context for the group here too, the CTE committee. It predates you joining our team this summer a little bit. For the committee, also just wanted to emphasize this is a good reference point because this is somewhat new from the spring meeting we had when we last spoke a bit about career counseling. At that time, we were tracking new legislation, kind of reassigning some evaluation roles, and we were mapping these roles out with our partners listed here on the slide. So some of this is relatively newly defined, but does put the Governor's Workforce Board and the CTE committee in the seats kind of listed here around some of the support, a little bit of oversight, a little bit of mediation of challenges and issues as they arise with partners implementation and professional development, and as it's across here, of course, the AIB ultimately responsible for final oversight. So I wanted to share that as a little context too. This is somewhat new. I'm happy to take questions on this presentation as well. Here, Richard.
You have an online website where.
Thank you. Yes, and for the audience and our CT members, there's a new website housed by MSDE for, and we can make sure we show this in our final meeting materials too. Sorry, it's not on the slide actually. A new hub for resources for career counselors from all the partners as we're doing all of our things work together. MC houses for career counselors, and that is live. So thank you, Richard, for your saying that.
Thank you, Lady Chair. So again, thanks for that historical context and where we are now. So again, this information will be made available and we'll be sharing MST's website. So I'd like to hand it over to Shauna with Jobs for the Future to just share about her findings from this initial desk research into Maryland's career counseling.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. If you want to move to the next slide, please.
We kind of highlighted this.
Mary, did you want to speak to that? Okay.
We kind of highlighted this initially, but this is the CTE committee's role in this career counseling work. And again, we have already completed those focus groups and the surveys with the career counseling. This is the best practices report you'll hear about, as well as the career counseling framework, which will also be available at the beginning of the year. And again, that technical assistance that Rachel mentioned in partnership with Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland Workforce Association is currently in development in partnership with JFF as well. So thank you.
As has been shared, JFF was asked to review the MOUs created between the LEAs, the workforce boards, and community colleges as part of Maryland's career counseling model. So I'll be sharing a summary of those findings today, but you can find the full report. I believe it was included in today's attachments. You want to go to the next slide? Thank you. Maryland's Blueprint for the Future legislation created a hallmark career counseling program, defining it as a key driver to impact student readiness for post-secondary pathways. The career counseling program has been in full implementation since July 2023. Maryland's career counseling model uses a tri-agency shared governance model, inclusive of workforce boards, K-12 education, and community colleges, and they are collectively tasked with designing and implementing the program within each jurisdiction statewide. The MOUs serve as a central component used to define their local implementation and hold each partner accountable for their role in the program. Ultimately, the North Star or guiding vision for Maryland is for all students to identify a post-college and career readiness pathway by the end of 10th grade. Next slide, please. To create the report, JFF focused on an analysis of several different data sources provided by the Accountability Implementation Board, including MOUs from 2023 to 2025, annual reports from 2024-2025 school year, and notes from the 2025 spring check-in meetings held by the Accountability Implementation Board. It is important to note that the data included in the report is limited to these sources and does not include the direct feedback from local sources that will be part of the report that was referenced before, the best practices part 2, and will be released in January 2026. An additional note is we do recognize that jurisdictions use a number of different terms for the career counselor role. For the sake of this report and today's discussion, we'll focus on utilizing career counselor as it aligns with the term in legislation. Next slide. In January 30th, the CTE committee meeting, there was a discussion about potential metrics for evaluating the career counseling program. 3 categories were introduced to organize the metrics and the structure of evaluation: implementation, impact, and outcome data. For the sake of this report, JFF utilized these same categories to analyze implementation through the lens of the MOUs. The implementation section will focus on how the partners are designing their shared work and managing resources. The impact section will focus on how the partners are monitoring progress. While outcome data was not considered in this report because implementation is still in early stages, there is a brief section and review of data collection related to current outcomes. Next slide. Overall, we were able to identify 3 overarching themes in our review of the data. The first, the model as designed with the tri-agency governance and local control does provide flexibility for jurisdictions to tailor the program to their specific local needs and resources. This is evident in the diversity of implementation models included in the MOUs. The second, the diversity in model also reveals high variation across how programs are governed, staffed, and integrated into the student experience. Additionally, training for staff and role definitions vary widely as well. And lastly, Maryland has a vision that regardless of whether a student lives in St. Mary's County or Montgomery County, they have access to high quality career counseling that supports their post-secondary planning and prepares them to make informed decisions. The MOU reveals opportunities to push closer to Maryland's vision through standardization of quality, data and accountability policies, and the role of the career counselor overall. This can be done while maintaining local control and flexibility. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. In the implementation section, we'll focus on the scope of the career counseling program as it relates to governance and partnerships, staffing, fiscal management, training and qualifications, delivery models, and student engagement. For each topic, you'll see a summary of the findings from the data sources, as well as opportunities for the state to consider as you move closer to your overall vision. Next slide. Governance and partnerships. In the MOUs, there is a revelation that there are 3 primary ways career counselors are hired and staffed within a jurisdiction: LEA staffing, local workforce development staffing, or hybrid models. In the hybrid, there are career counselors that are hired by both LEA and the Workforce Board. These variations show varying levels of clarity regarding the role of the career counselor and how they are integrated into the student experience. The state has an opportunity to consider providing clarity for local jurisdictions about the expected roles of each partner agency, including the LEA, the Workforce Board, and community colleges, as well as to provide support and best practices as they navigate building relationships and defining their own shared governance. The MOUs provide an opportunity to strengthen accountability between local partners and to define shared progress monitoring for overall implementation. Next slide. MOUs include budget and role descriptions for staff hired to support the program. Review of this data shows that there are a number of variations in place related to career counselor to student and school ratios and hiring expectations for career counselors. Some jurisdictions combat these variations, often dictated by funding allocations through strategic use of partnerships, including Peer Forward, Avid, and others. Additionally, retention was named as a challenge for career counselors, in particular because of the ratios and gaps in qualifications versus role expectations. To fulfill the state's vision, there are several opportunities to consider: streamlining and standardizing professional development for career counselors, setting a minimum bar for expectations for the role of career counselor to ensure consistency in the student experience, and supporting jurisdictions in the use of resources and funding to bolster programmatic offerings. The state can also consider opportunities to support recruitment and retention statewide for the career counselor. Next slide. The primary funding model is through restricted per pupil allocation based on enrolled pre-K to 12th grade students each year with a yearly increase for inflation. MOUs show how partners allocate the funds and manage resources across partners. There are variations in process and frequency of fund disbursement to partners, which can lead to implementation challenges in some cases. The lead partner for hiring sets the salary scale for career counselors, which leads to a wide variation in salaries for career counselors across jurisdictions. Opportunities Maryland can consider are streamlining and providing guidance related to administrative requirements, including data collection. One example cited is larger districts have hired dedicated data analysts to support data collection and reporting, while smaller districts are embedding this into existing roles. While these types of variations are not uncommon in program implementation, support for districts and review of administrative expectations can help reduce burdens. Similarly, providing guidance and best practices to support schools navigating larger counselor to student ratios with respect to expectations related to individualization and tailoring career advising to student strengths and interests. Lastly, just as mentioned before, providing guidance and use of partnerships and braiding funding to bolster programmatic gaps jurisdictions may experience. You can move to, thank you. To deliver career counseling, jurisdictions primarily use a blended approach of pushing into classrooms for presentations, and career assessments are relied on heavily on a variety of different platforms. These career assessments provide data to inform counselors of student strengths and interests and inform individualized approaches to career counseling. Capacity challenges related to the ratios impact the depth and breadth of the individualized approaches within jurisdictions. Engagement activities span from self-assessments such as RIASEC, career fairs, and industry tours to job shadowing and mock interviews. To address questions and variations in student experience, the state should consider defining minimum expectations for the student experience and key milestones, as well as guidance for meeting minimum student expectations across the 3 primary delivery models. Next slide. In summary, the counselors are primarily through the 3 state partners, the 3 local partners. Second, the variations exist in professional development, training, and hiring expectations, and these variations do impact retention. Funding flexibility can impact disbursement processes and require additional support to ensure consistency in the model across jurisdictions. Generalized presentations and classroom engagement is consistent across jurisdictions, while the capacity to tailor and individualize to student strengths is impacted by funding, ratios, and access to data. Students participate in a wide range of career readiness efforts across the state. This provides a foundation to prepare students for deeper career exploration and preparation activities, such as internships and apprenticeships, etc. Thank you. This next section, as we move into impact, considers how partners monitor the effectiveness of the partnership, including their data systems and accountability, student engagement impact, and industry partnership expansion. You can go to the next slide. In the 2025 annual report submitted to AIB, jurisdictions were asked to report on student outcomes. This chart shows the variation in data jurisdictions, in the data that jurisdictions have the capacity to report. Of note, some jurisdictions did have data for one grade band, but not both, and therefore are not included in the count here, where both grade bands were included in the metric. This is the first year that student outcomes were included in the annual report, and while they have done a significant amount of work to capture data to evaluate progress, the state has an opportunity to support jurisdictions to have consistent data collection processes, consistent definitions of data to be included in reporting, and streamline reporting processes, and again, reduce administrative burdens. Next slide. For systems and accountability, jurisdictions rely on technology platforms such as Zello and SchoolLinks and Pathful to conduct the career assessments for students and support the process of tailoring the student experience in alignment with strengths and interests. Jurisdictions report that data sharing, particularly navigating data privacy rules, is a challenge. This impacts how data is shared across partners, how it's collected, and how it is defined. Opportunities for the state to consider include sample data sharing agreements, guidance related to data sharing best practices, a data dictionary to streamline definitions, and create a shared language across jurisdictions in analyzing outcomes and guidance related to application of data privacy. To understand the overall impact of the program, shared language and outcome data are absolutely necessary tools. Next slide. The data shows that partners prioritize career awareness and exploration as central to student engagement. The handoff between those responsible for career awareness, exploration, and preparation, which includes on-the-job training, are not clearly defined in the data reviewed. Schools are navigating challenges related to scheduling and supporting larger student populations, and data shows that tracking systems to monitor student engagement is limited at this time. The state can consider opportunities to provide guidance to streamline and smooth the connection between career counseling, work-based learning, and to support the student experience. Aligning data and outcomes between student academic, advising, and work-based learning initiatives will strengthen support for CCR pathway participation and success. And lastly, jurisdictions would benefit from promising practices to showcase ways to address some of these barriers. Next slide. One component of career counseling is the engaging industry partners. Of note, the depth and breadth of these partners varies widely across jurisdictions for a number of reasons, and the state can consider ways to provide guidance for jurisdictions to navigate communication and coordination across partners to align outreach to employers and professional development for building effective employer relationships. Next slide. And I'll skip this because I believe we want to pause so that we have time for questions. So the last slide here is if you go to the recommendation slide. So finally, we have 3 overall recommendations for the state to consider. First is a focus on governance and guidance. Jurisdictions seek clarity in roles and responsibilities and ways to navigate a shared governance model to ensure consistency within and across jurisdictions. Second, prioritizing equity through standardization of key roles and processes and training can ensure student experiences reach the minimum expectations of the state, regardless of where they live. And lastly, focus on data and accountability to create a shared language and data processes to ensure progress is monitored consistently and with efficacy across the state. Thank you, everyone. I open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Shana. Really appreciate this presentation. A lot of information there, and I know that we have more coming, which we'll talk about in a second, but really appreciate all the work you've done and including really looking at these agreements closely to see what we can learn through them and through the work you've done. So first I'll just, committee members, any questions that emerge from you as you're thinking about the opportunities JFF's highlighted what they've done so far? Go for it.
I have like a million.
Amazing.
I have several questions, and they're more technical. I think the report is fine. I have no concerns. They're more technical and just informational. So Shana, thank you for this. When you say retention, I want to just clarify, you're talking about career counselor retention, yeah? Not like in the context of student retention in a specific program.
Correct. Career counselor retention.
Okay, professional. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so my second question, I think is a little bit uneducated, so I apologize if this is now taking us back in history. Where did the metrics come from? How did those get developed? I don't know if there's a too long didn't read elements on that.
That's all right. Shannon, do you want to start with some of the metrics you were looking at, or we can start on our side?
I don't want us to go down the rabbit
No,
hole.
it's fine. So, I think sorry, Shannon, were you about to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say the metrics that we included came from the annual reports that the jurisdiction submitted this spring. I believe they are also part of the spring legislation that included metrics, if I recall correctly.
You nailed it. And so those metrics from the annual reports, those were set forth by the AID and what they wanted to collect back from districts. Going into future rounds, there's kind of more of a collaborative process across the partners listed earlier in defining what we want to see there. And some of them are from that legislation, which some of the legislation actually was inspired by work this committee did in 2024 to start laying out what we want to see evaluated. And so the AID will kind of do further into the future, we'll be doing some additional evaluation on those metrics too.
Was this a 2025 legislation or 20?
Yes, 25 years in, yes, it's 25.
Okay, great, thank you. This is a broader question. And I don't know if the MOUs are like, how is the advising the career counseling impacting student choice around things like going into a CTE program or maybe moving into a magnet high school? That's hard to measure, but right, that's the essence of all of this. So I don't know if there can be a little commentary on that. Like, I know this is about implementation, but.
That's a wonderful question. Sheena, happy to have you maybe start with some of what you've seen, go through the desk research for this particular report on MOUs, and then for the next round report, you're going to be delivering on some other best practices, kind of what you've heard in this space. And to the extent there's open questions, that's great feedback for what we ask next.
Yes, I would lean into the feedback that we're hearing, and it was definitely represented in the annual reports as well, where, it really varies. That the ratio is a challenge as they are looking to provide that more tailored and individualized guidance for students and thinking through their pathway. They're relying a lot on technology platforms to help them to be able to understand what the students' interests are and where they'd like to go. And so where those things are either not as effective or where there may be challenges for career counselors to access the data on those platforms, that can be impacted significantly. Then when you think about schools that are much larger and you have one or two counselors assigned to serve a very large number of students, their ability to be able to provide that one-on-one conversation with students becomes impacted significantly. So I think the desire is there. In practice, it is still challenging in many places to be able to provide and think about it from a one-to-one conversation for students.
That's helpful. I look at the metric students completing a 6-year plan, which is great, completing the plan. And not that it should be a date, but like, then do students fulfill that plan? And when do students maybe change the plan or deviate from the plan? And what are the on-ramps and off-ramps for being like, oh, I dabbled in this thing when I was in 8th grade, I did a little career, I went on a field trip and I realized, oh wow, engineering is not the thing I want to be doing, right? Like, that would be interesting, and that's kind of long term, yeah. So, oh, sure, thank you.
I think that 6-year planning piece is a good flag, but also at the same time, there's been a lot of work happening on the back end of things to really think about the good processes and the right training that needs to be in place. Comar is very clear that every student in the state of Maryland is required to have an individualized graduation plan. Like, that's already in statute. How that's being operationalized is different across the entire state. And Comar itself is very broad in what that graduation plan needs to be. And so in many of our jurisdictions, it looks more like a 4-year plan. So how do we get the student to graduation, right? We're utilizing the career counseling system as a way to now systematize that already statutory requirement to make sure that good planning is happening. There's a lot of details that have to go into that. what does the plan look like? What does it include? When it is, when is it updated and by who, right? So that guidance is being released in early January. We're inviting 5 members of various degrees of leadership from our LEAs to a full day convening on January the 30th. We're doing this in partnership with the Maryland Workforce Association and our other partners, so that we're able to detail very cleanly what the requirements are. Statute says that these have to be updated every annually for the students. Through this updating, it takes a community of folks, right? It's the entire network of students are caring adults that are working with students who are updating this plan. So we'll release that in January. We'll make that available. Maybe worth having maybe a future meeting. Sharing with this committee what that plan looks like and then what that guidance looks like to give more specific questions. I know that those things are.
Those are really, I have one more question. Okay, let's keep going, we're gonna move to the committee.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's fine.
Go for it.
No, I can save my question
Okay.
for another day.
Okay, we will have a
Thank you.
lot to, no, that's all right, but I do wanna make sure the committee has a chance to kind of, stepping back, thinking about the presentation, we just heard some additional information, through those really good questions, this committee represents kind of agencies, employers, educators, organized labor and apprenticeship experts, so I'm curious from your perspectives, anything jumping out where you still have burning questions, like in the next iteration of reporting, beyond what's been shared here, but additional work JFF will do with us for elaborating on best practices, and then ultimately providing some of that clarity Shannon talked about, recognizing that need. In a framework and expectations for career counseling that we'll deliver in spring. What are you just dying to know? What do you need to know or need to understand better through the sort of next couple months of work to round this out?
So I just want to understand responsibilities here because, I don't disagree with anything in the report, but it's like a framework. Like I think we all know this, right? Like local control and, saying them quickly, there's a wide variation of practices, a wide variation of experience. In the developing of the recommendations, who is that done through this sort of back and forth? Is JFF doing it? Because I do think like recommendations have to be incredibly specific. They don't want to be prescriptive, but for busy educators and teachers, they're like, okay, just tell me, like, do I have to do X by 7th grade and Y by 9th grade? Like, I just gotta know so I can build it in. So like, how do we get to that level of specificity? Like, who does that?
No, thank you, and our expectation is that is the next phase of work that JFF is supporting us in doing, but with the back and forth between stakeholders in the field and this committee is meant to be a voice to help steer and guide that work and make sure it's getting to the level that the state needs, in addition to the level that our counselors on the ground need. So Sheena, if you'd like to elaborate on anything there, happy to invite you to do so.
Yes, I would just add in terms of the recommendations that are included in the report, it was definitely a collaborative process. So we utilized research from national best practices and from work that JFF has done, but we also have worked with Shamara to create a working leads group, and they were a part of developing this report and reviewing it and refining it. And so that includes representation from MSDE, Maryland Workforce Association, as well as Shamara and Latifa Durant. And so they were able to review and to offer feedback as well.
And I do also just want to give the JFF team and the colleagues mentioned a lot of credit for this work. And it feels kind of strange how it's broken up and why are we waiting a couple months for the next pieces? Just to be totally transparent, the AIE made it very clear to us as we were embarking on kind of going a little faster to the next steps, that we actually needed to slow down into the MOU report first, because the statutory language is very specific about the MOU best practice reporting. So we wanted to make sure we got as much as we could out of that before we do these 2 pieces. So that's why it's kind of broken up rather than all being delivered to you here this day.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I'm super interested in is what came out of the focus groups and what, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and how that informs, strategy, the structure, people, like how, and I guess, in this report, we talk a lot about, on the metric side, we talk a lot about saying this is the number of counties that were able to report this metric, but there's nothing about what the actual metric was. I think we need to understand that in the next, where are we? I know we're super early, it may not be super exciting to look at, but we need to understand, where we are. And then the other thing that's on my mind is, it seems like to do this at scale and well, county by county, we should be thinking about what functions, should be sort of statewide, like how do you deploy expertise that is available to all counties, regardless of whether, they have someone with that expertise in the county or not. While also having, obviously the work is very local, working with students in the schools. But you can't have an expert in every lighthouse sector in every county. That's not gonna happen. So how do we, that balance of really tapping into the same level of expertise for all counties, and pulling that into the schools? Yes, and
Yeah,
then just one more thing, and then I'll shut up. This really struck me when we visited, Baltimore City Schools, for one of our expert review team visits. One of the schools we did was tight collaboration between school council, traditional school counselors and the career coach, and so I'm also, I guess, wondering if that is a piece of what we want to look at in terms of best practices, like how do you, that feels like there should be a real partnership and integration there, because you're talking about a group of people who are all trying to advise students and their families, and so those are.
That was my comment.
Well, go ahead, say it.
Yeah. Same thing I was thinking, the relationship between the two, because the two are doing similar, not the same work, but I think it's more focused for the career counselors. So how do we leverage that to make sure that we got that whole concept? And then, every meeting, I say the same thing. Let's remember the jurisdictions that don't have the same resources, funding, or partnerships that others have, and how do we level that playing field?
Shona, were you gonna say something? I'm sorry.
Yes, and sorry if it's not necessarily speaking to all the points that you made, but just to in the middle of what you were talking about in terms of like how do you get it to be more specific. So one of the things that we will be doing in January is releasing the career counseling framework. So in addition to the expansion of this that represents the focus group feedback that we heard from folks on the ground, we are also creating a framework that will help the state look at how you move from collaboration to from coordination to collaboration to really full integration of this model. And so it will provide some really tangible and specific ways that you can then start to move closer to your full vision. And I think we'll answer some of the questions that you just named there. I also think that as we look at the best practices report, it will help to share some light on kind of what that relationship looks like between staff within the buildings, to the question that you just named.
Great, thank you so much.
So on that piece, I think, so we shared this with our CTE directors this morning during our monthly check-in. Maybe valuable to send very much to you all as well and have a sort of presentation.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, what we are rolling out on January 30th, we've invited 5 folks from the LEA level. That includes the chief academic officer, director of school counseling, director of student support, so CT director, and the nursing supervisor and career coaches. Because as we are rolling this out, it's going to take every single one of the individuals sitting in that room that things that they need to fully support students. Career counselors can't do it alone, and they shouldn't be doing it alone. It takes that coordinated effort. That mirrors the process development that we created at MSP, where all of those different divisions representing all of those individuals at the LEA level have been included, provide input, modifications, and very specific elements of the career counseling plan. We are modeling it at the state level so that LEs can replicate that model at the local level to provide the best support for students. And that's what that January 30th guidance will provide. We've also mapped out the entire year of what this rollout looks like for 2026 into 4 phases. And so you'll see that in the documentation that we provide. And I think many of the themes that you said today will be addressed in that, but certainly it's early enough that additional feedback is welcome on how we can make this the most effective system that we can.
Thanks, Jordan. Helpful to know how we can innovate on that side. I do think, sometimes when we do reports, we do them like satellite view images, like this is what the landscape looks like. But for career counselors and folks on the ground, they need like turn by turn, you know, instructions. And so just as we think about, you need to know the overall satellite view to be able to guide you in that. But I just like, as we morph towards that more specific guidance, I would just, you know, urge everyone to just bear that in mind, that it does have to get to that level to be more prescriptive.
So thank you for that. And I was also just going to clarify for the framework deliverable. We will be sharing with you and asking for feedback before it's live, and potentially even, so might be able to include in our January meeting specifically, but between now and then, we'll be wanting to get interim feedback from our committee members on this, to ensure that it's meeting all these needs. Yeah. Oh, that's it.
Any other questions, thoughts on the best practices report? If not, we need to take a vote. So, because this is, we are required to submit this first version to the AIB on December 1st. So, if everyone is good, I could have a motion to approve the report. Can I have a second? Second. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The report passes, and we will, if that's true.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Norton, and thank you again, Shelley and colleagues at JFF and team. We wanted to take a few minutes for the end of our, you know, sort of latter part of our time here today to kind of recap where we've been, what we've been doing and gotten done so far as a committee. Preview where we're going next, and have a conversation and a dialogue with you all about how you all engage in the work and how we can best engage in the work next when we talk about what's coming up. So I won't read through every item. We will highlight a couple of things here on the slide, but I do want to say I think, you know, reflecting back on at least, you know, for me, I can speak our 2 years together. We've done a lot of, I think, really important and hard work to lay some critical definitions, expectations, foundations down for how we're accomplishing blueprint goals, what we mean when we say an apprenticeship opportunity or industry recognized credential is good enough and is industry aligned and is going to get students where we hope to see them go and see them excel. And we've also done some work to lay additional foundations that will guide us in implementation as the work is already rolling out in communities across our state. So one piece that we're really excited to highlight is something that we all worked on together over the summer in kind of ad hoc meetings of the committee and designees from our partner agencies. And that's a really exciting new Perkins Reserve grant opportunity. Those grants are out now. And so I invite you to share a little bit more about the grantees and what they're working on. But this was a partnership developed with MSCE to have the committee be able to guide and steer where we want to invest precious Perkins Reserve dollars. In other words, flexible resources at the Perkins for Technical Education, federal money grants, Maryland. And we were able to really line these up with districts that are looking to do really cool things to expand access to apprenticeships and registered apprenticeship aligned pre-apprenticeships, all programs that are going to support the progress toward that big 45% goal in our state. So really excited about this partnership. Thank you, Richard, Superintendent Wright, and team. And Shamir, tell us more about the grantees.
So we have, thank you, Rachel, for that summary of the 4 Perkins Reserve grantees that we awarded this year in partnership again with the Maryland State Department of Education. We have Cecil County, Calvert County, we have Harford County Public Schools, Frederick County Public Schools, as well as Montgomery Public Schools. I'd like to announce that that is live on our website, so we will be sharing additional information with the link to the one pager that'll tell you a little bit more about how these districts are expanding registered apprenticeships and access to career opportunities for their students, as well as information into how much each of these LEAs were awarded. So it will be live. It is live, so we'll share it. Thank you, Richard.
Yes, we're super excited and congratulations to the grantees and thank you committee members. It was really your influence in setting the path forward for what our goals are gonna look like, but really charted where we ask grantees to focus their efforts. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And again, I'm not gonna read through every item. We previewed some of the things coming up, just so you kind of know what we're doing as we round out the end of the year. Staff side things we're asking you all to review and respond to, including things we've voted on here today. I do want to also preview for our January meeting. We'll have quite a bit of work to do. One piece is going to be the next round of industry recognized potential approvals with programs that have applied for approval based on the quality criteria and definitions that this committee set forth at the end of 2024. So this is our second time doing this with MSCE. And wanted to just preview that you'll have some things to review, take a close look at ahead of that portion of our January meeting next year. And as we turn to thinking about next year, I think this piece of the discussion is really important for us because we want to emphasize a few things. One is this year we managed as a committee and as a team, I think, to do quite a bit, grow a lot, certainly with our new staff onboarding. As we look to next year and thinking about where we're moving, and if we go to the next slide, we are really looking to move into a very forward-leaning implementation posture and a leadership posture with our sister agencies working to implement Pillar 3 of the blueprint. One thing I wanted to note here, this is for the committee, what our team looks like now for the Governor's Workforce Board. And on the right-hand side, you see our CTE team led by Shamara. I'm pleased to share that, as we shared earlier this year, we did have 2 positions frozen given the budget situation at the state level. Pleased to share we were able to get our CTE ERT manager position unfrozen. We are looking at changes we might need to make to our spring ERT schedule. We'll keep you all closely updated just to make sure we manage that capacity as we move into some of the work we're really going to be pushing starting after this meeting and in the next couple of months to make sure our team has capacity. They've really been absorbing a lot of the time and effort that one individual would have taken on and doing a tremendous job, I should say, by the way. So thank you, everybody. But we know we need to make sure that we have staff who can focus on supporting the committee on what's next. So I wanted to share that quickly with everybody, and we can pivot next to what's coming up. And I'll invite Chair Norton to share more on this first piece on the joint vision statement. This work is really critical. I think we know, and everyone on the committee, everyone watching has certainly known the blueprint sets some really ambitious goals around deep systems transformation and sets a really high bar and a high number for what the blueprint thinks that looks like in terms of apprenticeships, in particular registered apprenticeships, as well as other industry recognized credentials. And we know that's been really hard out in the field to message, to talk about, to help people see themselves with the possibility of the progress, and to really make sure all the partners are aligned around. And so this joint vision statement Chair Norton will speak about is a next step of getting at that, and we'll have a special meeting in December.
Thank you. Before I talk about the joint vision statement, I just personally want to thank the staff for having participated in an expert team visit. This is a lot of work, and it was a full-time person's full-time job. And so the team has had to really take that on top of their, their own roles that are full-time and so really appreciate and then executed them well. So we appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I'm really excited about this joint vision statement. This came about through conversations with the governing boards, AIB, CTE committee, MSCE, State Board of Education, really talking about, and in that mix, Department of Labor, really saying how can we be very clear about our joint vision for this work and what it means for, and then essentially talked a lot in this committee about the importance of having North Star, what we are navigating towards. Can we develop a succinct statement of that North Star that can be this sort of guiding, gets put in front of everyone, something we keep going back to and say, okay, in the 57-page document that we now have to produce for the implementation, whatever, is this getting us towards the North Star? Is this aligned with what we have all said that we, And also, to be frank, putting an artifact in place that outlives any one of us, any individual, right? And so it's been a collective labor of love, et cetera. And so we have a draft that all the bodies have agreed to that we'll be sharing out, this is like hot off the presses, so we'll be sharing that with committee members to review. We wanted to make sure everyone had ample time to review it, so we'll have a special committee meeting just to vote on that vision statement. It's being voted on today at the AIP. But really, really excited for us to consider that. And then, and you know, we will vote on it on the 3rd, and then I believe the State Board of Education will vote on it on the 9th. So by the end of this year, we are hoping to have that joint vision statement ratified and signed off by our partners in labor and MSTE, et cetera. So, and then the next phase of this will be that joint vision statement, which is literally I think it's a page or less, right? So we really worked to get this. In my experience, vision statements don't work if they're too long. So you need something that anybody can read and understand and captures, you know, short attention spans these days. So that's coming to everyone. Please review. Please reach out to me directly or to Rachel if there are any concerns, questions, anything, you know, if one has any comments on, you definitely want to take that and then look forward to that special meeting in December. And then following that, the work will begin to create a joint implementation. So as you heard earlier, each of our bodies are required to submit implementation notes to the AIB. And sort of in the same vein as the joint vision statement said, shouldn't we have a high level joint implementation plan that ensures that all of our individual work is tied together holistically? So that's coming soon. And I'll turn it over to Rachel to take us through what's next.
Thank you. And just quickly on the implementation plan, and this will tie to these questions we want to talk about a bit. One thing that's very clear in the blueprints that this committee has a role to play in supporting and kind of driving, saying, hey, where are we? Okay, if we said MSC will do this, labor will do this, MPEC will do this, that we ourselves, this committee would do X or Y. Where are we every time that we come back together? And so you'll see that posture and that kind of what we're doing in our meetings here change when we have that joint. I would say real implementation plan. We know that our AIB implementation plans get very detailed about statutory requirements, but this is the real who's doing what, when, how, much more specific to some of the points made earlier.
How are we measuring?
Exactly how we're measuring it, and coming back to talk about what the measures look like, what the numbers are every time that we're together. And so with that in mind, and thinking about, you know, that's us in 2026 and beyond. First, you know, certainly welcome reflections on accomplishments that feel most significant or high impact, really because we want to be mindful of what's going to really help this group be impactful going forward, and what you see as opportunities for this to make a difference and a deeper collaboration here.
Yeah. I'll say, and it's a very basic thing, the fact that we have been able to maintain and continue to progress with the ERT visits, especially with the academic staffing, because I think those types of committees really truly create a way for us to have a clear insight from the people on the ground, and that's really hard to work without. And still try to provide guidance, structure, and move things forward. So the fact that we continuously keep those going really enabled us to do our jobs well.
And actually, on that note, I'd love to dig in more on that. You know, as we think about the future of our ERTs, I'm curious, does this committee feel like, you know, you've had enough access to, oh, I understand what we're learning in real time as you go through it, or are there things we as a staff team could be doing better to help make sure you guys get those insights as we continue just quarter by quarter?
I mean, I think collectively, obviously, all of us can't attend every single
Yes.
one of them.
Yes.
So if there is a way to create some like succinct reporting that allows us to kind of see what the trends are across the different ones. It's great when we're able to attend. I may hit 1 or 2 in a year, but there are tons. And so I want to know what's going on at the other locations. as well.
And maybe there's a routine, quick segment here of kind of what we're seeing in the field every time. Yeah. Great, that's a plus one, excellent. Thank you. Good, and when you see, on that note, opportunities for deeper collaboration with each other, we have global partners here as well, across agencies, as this committee. Is there any place where you're thinking, I really wish we did more of this between meetings? I always work on this like back to it.
I'm probably not the best person to ask, since I
You
feel
are
like
doing
there's
it
a
the whole
lot
time.
between how I'm doing meetings. So, but I think the more we can think about sharing and disseminating in digestible chunks what we are, what we're learning on the ground, how it's informing what we, as we look at, stuff like, okay, we're gonna be contemplating career counseling framework, well, having some interim, again, I think the key here is short. I think short, here's some of the things that we did. These ERT visits or had these meetings or met with the AIB, and here's what we learned. I know for me, and I'm deep into it a lot, it's still, is a lot to understand all of the citizens of the board. We can help the board kind of keep pace, but at a level that is a level that.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this? We kind of talk just more broadly speaking, when we think about supporting and driving implementation, what the committee as a body, what individual members can be doing to really support and amplify the work that you're not doing already, you're already doing great.
Maybe, I think this is related to the question about like what can we be doing so when if we can't go to some of the visits, or like can we be doing to educate ourselves as individual committee members so we can be better participants? I'm just trying to think if there are other resources we should look at, or like one thing is like I personally have not spent a lot of time with career counselors, like having a really active back and forth. Like, I sometimes meet them and speak to their other people, the educators, they do a quick presentation and they go away, get one or two questions. I don't know if there's value to kind of you guys may like, gosh, an hour Zoom off cycle of meeting with like 4 or 5 career counselors where we can just ask them a whole bunch of questions. We can save some questions beforehand, or there's some targeted fact findings that could be really useful for us as a committee. I'm just sort of brainstorming here about that, but as we're teeing up to go deeper in some of these report areas, maybe that.
I think that's really interesting, and what that actually makes me think of is that's a good example, and we probably do every time we're working through deliverables, and we're starting to do this with some of our broader kind of governor's workforce board policy deliverables. Is what are opportunities for board members to engage with staff and with people on the ground who are impacted by the things we're producing in real time between our meetings, and not necessarily in a formal full day setting. So I think that career counseling is a really good one. I think as we do future work on apprenticeship, there's just going to be more. We can think of other examples for things like that we can offer that would be hopefully really helpful. And it really is inviting you guys to see the things that our staff teams already do, where we can make that work. And one other thing that I'll kind of share on that note, I just lost my train of thought. Nope, I'm just going to do that. So good, yeah.
About amplifying the support, right? Like, I would love to amplify it. Tell me where it best supports you and actually helps to raise them. So if you have an idea of how we as the board can amplify your work in a particular convening or situation or with particular people, I'm more than willing to do it.
That's what it was. More or less, that's what that was. Thank you. That's good.
The one thing I've been thinking a lot about is that we're now moving into a phase, like, we set a bunch of policy and we define things, and now we're moving into a much more serious implementation. And I think, I want to test this, I think our role here is to really understand what is happening at scale and where the major roadblocks are. We have to do that at the appropriate level. Like, we're not gonna be able to solve every problem that every individual school has. So part of what I think the board needs help with from the teams here is understanding this is really about pattern spotting and understanding what are the consistent challenges that, okay, if we, and then I think it is our job to try to figure out what are the interventions that, you know, how, what do we need to do to help figure out solutions, but it should be things that, if we solve this problem, it's gonna impact, you know, a wide swath of folks, and I guess I've been reflecting on a lot of, you know, maybe things we've heard or our meetings in the past have been more anecdotal than patterns and data driven. And I think we won't be doing our job as a committee if we're not really looking at sort of data driven, what are the problems that we're not gonna be able to solve every barrier out of the gate. And so what are the ones that have the biggest impact? And how can we focus on really moving those out of the way? We also won't be effective if we try to solve everything at once. And so again, figuring out what thing to tackle first requires a little bit different, you know, type of.
Mara, I think that's why I appreciate the future career counseling implementation, because it really gives you something that is pretty universal across all of them. And so I think if we continue to kind of go down this road of evaluating, it will help us to say, okay, when do we start? These are gaps. Let's address them.
Yeah, and just have, I guess I just want to say to every, you know, anyone who listens to this, that I don't think any of us sitting around this table think that we're all going to get it right.
Yeah, exactly.
People are gonna put frameworks together. And a lot of it's not going to work, or some, you know, I mean, there are gonna be things that aren't, but you can't figure out what works and what doesn't if you don't start. And so it's just, you know, just knowing that, yeah, we have to put frameworks in place, and we have to put accountability, we have to put metrics, not to be punitive in some way, but to say, oh, turns out we're not able to hit this. Why aren't we able to hit? Why can't we grow apprenticeships at the rate that we want to grow? Okay, what's standing in the way? All right. I mean, that's how you figure out what problems are. And you can't do that at scale if you're dealing with anecdotal inputs. You have to look at what's happening at a large scale. So
There's a group that I had talked about when we first started, haven't in a while. But we've all learned from each other. I mean, MSDE, MHEC, and DOL is in the room. We're all moving forward together, which is awesome. I mean, it wasn't like that in my young days of apprenticeship. And then we have to educate the students as to what the opportunities are. We need to educate their parents.
yes.
And I don't know that we've mentioned that coming up with whatever it is, you know, flyers and commercials and whatever else there is, to educate parents about all of the opportunities that their kids have.
Yeah, we heard that in both our schools a lot. One of the principals there said, I said, what's the biggest challenge? You know, is it a supply of apprenticeships, or is it a getting students? And she said, and to shift the reception, and
Oh, for sure.
because parents said, my kids going to college, that's, you know, and there's this perception that somehow it's lesser than to go into the workforce, or to the workforce. And so, yeah, just to echo what you're saying.
I've done my job beating up all Richard's people for 25 years.
Yeah.
The parents don't know though.
Yeah.
And I think a good opportunity for that, you know, I was a kid for a long time, CTE for a long time. But I think a good sort of inroad to that is when we talked about middle school and elementary school, because that should start with parents. Because, you know, all of our statistics know that, you know, probably better than I do, that you have their attention at that point, right? We start losing their attention, you kind of get ninth grade. But before that, you have the parents right there that are involved and that are listening. So part of it is, you know, what can we do early on when you're doing your middle school outreach? But you're thinking about, how does this career pathway look? And where do we start? Do we start in 5th grade, 6th grade, or where? Or include parents? That would get.
Well, I'm already hearing a few things, this is exciting. So a couple of things that we're taking away so far from this conversation, if there's more, please add to this. One is on trend lines and what we're seeing in the field. We did a little bit of that as we prepped for the Firkins grants, but I think we can deliver something pretty succinct. I'm gonna not put my team on the spot with the timeline right now, but we'll take that back as homework to figure out how quickly we can get you all something. Mary, unless Mary, you wanna do that, you can do that.
Well, no, I'd like to note though, that
Yes.
we have some of this CTE visit reports from
Yes.
last year published, so we'll be sure to make sure that we get that. And some of these, you all just to learn a little bit more about the visits that we did last year, as well as the 4 visits that we were able to do, we will complete by December. So some of those reports are available, they're live on our website, so I'll make sure at minimum that you all can read those to continue to learn about what's happening across the state.
And Molly also kind of just reminded us that we actually thought of this, which is great. Thought of it, it's gonna be in our annual report as well, so you'll receive a copy of that. I'll have a quick section with make sure you can point. This is where you're gonna see the trend lines and patterns, and he's gonna be putting that together for us. So thank you guys, and thanks for having me. Make sure you can see that so you can have that to start, and we'll think about how we can integrate that segment into our routine meetings, so we can keep that front of mind. And the other piece, just specifically on the career counseling opportunity, Richard's kindly volunteered to help host a brown bag with career counselors for our CTE committee. So we'll work on that. Richard, thank you for taking lead of a partner. They don't know it yet, but we'll partner with their friends at the Maryland Workforce Association on this as well. Thank you. So a couple of things right away. Thank you guys for that feedback.
Just like that.
Exactly.
And Brian hasn't had to beat up on us since I've been here, I don't think. We have a good, we can call each other.
That's good. What else before we move toward wrapping up?
The December 3rd invite will go when the document goes.
Yes, and you'll get that. Probably not tonight, but tomorrow, we'll get make sure you guys have the calendar invitation. It'll be a virtual, morning meeting on the 3rd. So thank you all. I know it's a relatively short notice, but thanks for the time. Okay, I'm gonna make sure, are we doing another slide on next steps before I miss anything? Thank you. And, we've shared some feedback already, but if you think of something else, you can send it to any of us on our team, certainly, or to our kind of general email address. This is also, we know there are members of the public viewing who are interested in these products, so please, by all means, this is available for you too. We're also looking for meeting locations for next year. We have some dates that will be posted to our website, but we'll be looking for generous partners to post us. So thank you in advance for those who reach out and are able to support or support community members if you've got great ideas. And a few dates to save, including that special virtual meeting the morning of the 3rd, as well as our next quarterly meeting with the Governor's Workforce Board and our next CTE committee meeting. So we'll get that all to members soon, and all that is through the website as well. Great, thank you all. And we'll make sure we keep you all updated as we get papers submitted from the outputs today and get these back to you. And just a reminder, many of you, by the way, some of you guys got gold stars for signing up for our new Wordable platform first. So thank you guys. It's about to become a lot easier and not a million more emails to go find your inbox and search for the right search terms, all the things. So members, please make your accounts by December 3rd. We're going to start with our December board meeting, having things really driven through there. We'll still email you, but that way you can just have one place where you go to find things and certain methods too. Thank you. All right, I think that's it. Team, did I get everything? What I missed? We're good. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing is that Marvel's back.
I forgot that in the Zoom.
Yeah, I had saw something a couple months back, I think it's. I like nice amount of people that were.
Yeah.
Yeah.